The game 1 in 30 dates back to about 1440. We list this date as the starting point because it's the earliest written record we can find of the game, and it's found in a sermon where the clergyman calls out 1 in 30 as an example of the kind of card gambling you shouldn't do. Despite the many sermons which were preached during Shakespeare's lifetime against gambling and games of chance like dice, they were extremely popular. All levels of society played this game, from the king down to the very lowliest of peasant, and they were played for a lot of different reasons. They were fun to play. Some people used this as their source of income, and they were extremely popular for holidays like Christmas time. 1 in 30 is an ancestor to the game of Blackjack, so as we learn to play it today in this episode, you'll see some similarities with the game of Blackjack, and that's why. The growth of playing cards during William Shakespeare's lifetime and over just preceding his lifetime, so through the 1400s, 1500s, into Shakespeare's life of the mid-1500s, there was this massive explosion of card games. And that falls in line with the creation of the printing press. Because cards are printed on paper, they are a product of the printing industry. So as the printing industry grew, so did the creation of playing cards and the proliferation of playing them. During Shakespeare's lifetime, French cards were actually the most popular for people in Shakespeare's lifetime, but the government in England became concerned with the excessive amounts of money being sent to France for their cards. They weren't exactly the biggest fans of France at this time in England, and the growth of cards in England grew so rapidly that it became a hindrance to the English economy. So the government put out rules saying that you could not import cards. You had to make them at home, and you had to pay for English cards. So a lot of the English cards that you'll find from the period are actually designed after French design. In 1495 to 1496, there was an edict signed by Henry VII. That would be the start of the Tudors. And he expressly forbade the practice of card playing by servants and apprentices. And he made an exception, though, for the Christmas holidays. And then, if they played it for Christmas, they could only do it in their master's houses. Apparently, playing cards was a source of great unruliness in England. And in the rules for the gentlemen of Henry VIII's privy chamber, he wrote that, quote, immoderate and continual playing of cards, tables, or dice was forbidden, although moderate playing of chess, tables, and cards was allowed. Now, I'll leave it to you to determine how you tell the difference between immoderate and moderate to please someone like Henry VIII, but that was his standard. Now, despite the continual battle between do we or don't we play, how much is too much, and where should we do it, 1 in 30 remained one of the popular card games during Shakespeare's lifetime. And while William Shakespeare's plays don't mention 1 in 30 by name, they do mention other card games like Naughty, which I show you how to play in a different episode here on YouTube. But there were other contemporary playwrights to William Shakespeare that wrote about the game 1 and 30, and it's actually these records in these plays where the characters are playing them in the plot of the play itself that give us our understanding of how the game was played. As an example, in Middleton's play called Christmas, the game is described as being both for children and that you play to a total point value of 31, which is how we know the game 1 in 30 was played to 31 points. At least it's one source of evidence. So now that you know the history of the game, are you ready to learn how to play? Excellent. Here is how the game is played. The game is for 2 or more players. Today we'll play with 2 players, but the game works the same if you have more. Each player is dealt 3 cards face down. This will form their hand. The dealer starts the deal to the player on his left. That will also be the first person to go first in the order of play. That player chooses a card from his hand to discard face up on the table. This establishes what's called the discard pile. Each subsequent player will put their card here as well. So now you have a discard pile and a deck or draw pile. The player replaces the card he's discarded by either drawing a card from the deck, or he can pick up a card that was previously laid down. So when it's your turn, you want to keep 3 cards in your hand, and you have to both lay one down and pick one up, and you have 2 options for how you want to pick one up. At all times, you keep 3 cards in your hand, and you're trying to get as close as possible to 31 points with the 3 cards you're holding in your hand. The key here, though, is that your 3 cards have to be of the same suit, with one exception we'll talk about in just a minute. The player that comes closest to 31 with their 3 cards in the same suit is the winner. Now, play continues either back and forth with 2 players or around the table with ever how many players you have, with everyone first discarding and then replacing their card until a player knocks twice on the table. After the knock, all of the players get at least one last chance to replace their card. Then everyone shows their hand. The hand with the cards that amount closest to 31 in the same suit wins that round. When you show your cards, if you and another player tie, then you redeal and no one wins anything. If at any point during the game you hit 31 points exactly in your hand, you win automatically and you don't have to knock twice on the table to compare with the fellow players. However, should you and another player both get 31 at the same time, nobody wins and you redeal the round. The idea would be to choose before you start playing exactly how many points you're going to play to. For example, you might choose to play to 500 and you just keep doing the rounds, assigning points to the winner each time until somebody at the table has accumulated 500 points. And that would mark the end of the game. It's absolutely arbitrary. One person got 31, now the game's over and we're walking away. Or you could choose, we're going to play ever how many rounds it takes for someone to get 300 points or 500 points. It's totally up to you. And that's not described in the official rules of the game. So that's just my note to you as you sit down to play this with your friends and family. So you've got to add up to 31 points. Well, how do we count the cards? I'm so glad you asked. Aces are worth 11 points. Face cards are each worth 10 points, and the rest of the cards in the deck are calculated based on their face value. So a 5 of hearts would be worth 5 points, a 3 of clubs would be worth 3 points. Whatever the number is on the number cards, that's how many points that card is worth. Now, I mentioned earlier that there was one exception, and the exception to your cards needing to be all the same suit is if you have 3 of the same thing in your hand, that counts as 30 and a half points. So if you got 3 of the same thing, you would knock twice to let everyone discard one more time and then show your hand. The odds are going to be very good that someone else can't beat 30 and a half points because they would have to have 31 points exactly to be higher than 30 and a half. So getting 3 of the same thing in your hand is also a really good play for this game and is the exception to the rule that says you cards need to be of the same suit. So that's how to play 1 in 30, an Elizabethan card game popular during the life of William Shakespeare, one he could have even played himself because it was certainly prevalent during his lifetime when he was writing his plays. Please hit like and subscribe here on YouTube if you like learning Shakespeare history. We're here every Saturday. Don't forget that if you like following along, activities like this one in our DIY history series are ones that you can actually try out at home. And we've put together printable guides that help you do this available on Patreon. We have bonus history like portraits and links to that scathing anti-card game sermon we mentioned in today's episode, as well as a printable guide to instructions for how the game is played and the information you need for how to score the cards and what combinations work best for this game. All of that is available in our episode guide for this week's episode. You can download it right now inside our DIY History Club on Patreon at patreon.com/thatshakespearelife. Join there today where you can follow along here each week on DIY History with recipes, games, and crafts from the life of William Shakespeare. That's it for this week. Thank you for being here. I'm Cassidy Cash, and I hope you learned something new about the Bard. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.